We want to know your limits ahead of time. So let's say we put you through a 10-week block of exercise. Could be 8, could be 6, 12, doesn't matter. And we just collect data. We don't make any changes based on your wearable data whatsoever. We're just running the program as is, like we're not collecting everything. And then we're able to look at all that information and say, okay, when did we notice drops in performance? When did we notice maybe getting sick more often? Were there any injuries that popped up? And we'll start to identify where your personal threshold is. And so we'll start to see, hey, okay, this particular line, don't cross this many miles per week. When we cross this many miles per week, we start doing more than that, we start getting hurt more often, or we start getting less return on our investment from a performance perspective, or mood gets really worse, soreness gets really high, desire to train gets really, really low. Something like that. You will actually start to find pretty quickly where your own individual lines are. You've got to start with data collection now. In the world of sports, this is a classic example of things like a pitch count. So in baseball, 100 pitches is like a very rough number that starting pitchers will pay attention to in the major league level. If you go to the youth sports, they actually have very specific restrictions. So in high school, they can only pitch a certain amount of innings before they have to have a certain amount of days off. Little leagues, same thing. And the reason they're doing that is not actually because they know that that individual kid will get hurt at that level, but they're able to look back at enough retroactive data and say, hey, roughly we start seeing this sharp increase of injury once we get past 100 pitches, or a sharp reduction in performance past 100 pitches, or effectiveness, or whatever the metric is that you care about. And so that's what I'm talking about here. Imagine having some sort of information like that about yourself, and so you can start understanding, hey, in my next program, we don't want to cross this many repetitions of squats, because over 85%. Because when I do, that's when we've seen problems in the past. Or I don't want to cross as many miles, or whatever the metric is for you. So tracking some data to get a better understanding of your overall load or readiness can be really helpful for predicting future negative outcomes. The third major advantage to this stuff is you will actually now be able to understand if you've truly crossed the threshold into overtraining, whether or not this thing is actually a chronic issue or you're a little bit fatigued or tired. As I mentioned, there's no official scientific definition of overtraining. But what you actually care about is, are you overtrained relative to you? Well, if you don't know what relative to you means, because you don't have this information in your back catalog, then you don't actually know, which means you actually don't know when it's been resolved or recovered or fixed. So having a baseline understanding of what's normal for you allows you to say, okay, I'm lower than normal. I've been lower than normal for this long. And now we start trying to climb out of that hole. When am I back to baseline? Well, without baseline information, you're not going to know. So even returning from negative consequences becomes suboptimal. We will cover a lot of options for tracking throughout this show, but I actually want to give you something right now, and that is what I call my MVP, or minimal viable solution. Something I think most people could do for free or basically no cost. So start off, measure something every day, or most days, in 3 different areas. Area 1 is pick something that is objective. This could be a scale, your body weight. It could be a HRV marker, or a resting heart rate, or a respiratory rate, or CO2 level. Something that is about your body that is not your perception. So that's your objective marker. Number 2, pick a subjective marker. This could be your mood, your desire to train, your energy, how well you think you slept last night. Anything that is up to your perception of how you're feeling in the world. Then number 3 is what I call your most severe performance anchor. This is different for everyone, but what is the one thing that is holding you back the most that you are aware of? What is the thing you're struggling the most with? What is the one thing you're focusing the most on? Maybe you're focusing a lot on your training and you track your running volume. It could be whatever. But what is that one major thing that you're working on that is the biggest hole in your game, the thing that is the most key component to you getting to the next level or achieving some sort of progress block, whatever it is you're going after. So to summarize all that again, pick one thing that is objective, one that is subjective, and one that is measuring something in your most severe performance anchor or focus area. Once you've decided on your list, the next thing you're going to do is track each of those for about 30 days. Could be a little bit longer, could be a little bit shorter, but at least that. I wouldn't take any action based on any of your data for those first 30 days. What you're going to want to look for are anything that lands outside of your normal average, back to that standard deviation, for more than 3 to 5 days. So one day of a bad mood, one day of a high body weight, one day of reduced vertical jump performance, not a big deal. What we're looking for are looking back at your 30-day average, getting that score. And then you're tracking after that 30 days. And anytime you see something that is more than one standard deviation, and you can Google how to calculate a standard deviation if you have 30 days of information, that's pretty easy. If you come anything outside of that standard deviation for more than 3 consecutive days, or say 3 days out of 4, or something like that, use your best judgment, then you might want to consider something is happening. Well, we're not going to make reactions on respiratory rate being elevated for 1 day. We're not going to make reactions on my sleep being a little bit down. Too many things play into these scenarios, and it's really acute fatigue. It doesn't tell us that we're plateauing. It doesn't tell us that we're stalling, and it definitely does not tell us that we're overtrained. We might be a little bit fatigued, but remember, causing adaptation requires overload. So a little bit of fatigue when we're trying to cause adaptation is actually what we're looking for. So once we've got that established, if we see a metric that is more than 2 standard deviations off for more than a couple of days, then you might take action immediately. You're following the program and you just start really falling off a cliff. And again, as a scientist, I'm actually using a pretty strong definition here, which is 2 standard deviations off my 30-day norm. What I'm trying to get the point out here is we don't want to overreact to single days. We want to make sure if it's kind of off for a number of days, 3 to 5 days, we're going to pay attention. If it's really off though, for more than a couple of days, then we might take action a little bit before that 5-day window, but probably has to be pretty substantial decrease in numbers before we're going to worry about it, okay? If either of those scenarios happen, so that big change, negative change for a couple of days, or a smaller but more sustained change for a long time, then we have to start digging ourselves out of the hole, and we got a whole episode to talk about how to do that. If you enjoyed this clip, you can watch the full episode by clicking here.